In the wake of one of Spider Man's most controversial stories called One More Day, the publisher really kind of shook up Peter Parker's life by making him a bachelor again and returning so many of his relationships to an earlier kind of standpoint at where they were. This also gave Marvel's editorial the opportunity to kind of shift up the creative teams on the Spider Man series, which included a lot of cool writers like Mark Waid, also the current amazing Spider Man writer Zeb Wells. But one of the writers who really stood out to me during this pivotal time when I was kind of first reading comics was Joe Kelly. Some of Joe Kelly's Spider Man stories always had this great sense of humor, but also this really kind of dramatic portion as well when the issue stood for it. One of my favorite kind of story arcs from Joe Kelly was the American Son title. And today we're going to go ahead and take a look at what Joe Kelly is bringing on a guest arc with artist Terry and Rachel Dodson with The Amazing Spider-Man. My name is Arico Braddock, and today let's go ahead and take a look at The Amazing Spider-Man number 19 to see if Peter and Felicia can get some much-needed rest and relaxation in the wake of Marvel's Dark Web crossover event. But before we dive deeper into the video, I want to go ahead and encourage you to consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button if you enjoy our content. And I want to start introducing the creative team behind this issue of The Amazing Spider-Man. This issue number 19 is written by Joe Kelly, of course. We have pencils and colors over from Terry Dodson. We have inks over from Rachel Dodson, letters from VC's Joe Caramagna. And the cover for this issue, which I'm going to show off in just a moment, is over from John Romita Jr., Scott Hanna, and Marcio Menyz. I want to read off Marvel's solicitation text for the issue to get you caught up to speed to everything happening in the Amazing Spider-Man's world. Dark Web is over, but the effects will shake Spider-Man for a long time. To recover, Peter Parker and Felicia Hardy, A.K.A. the Black Cat, escape from the city in an exclusive spa in the Catskills. Surely trouble won't follow our webhead and ruin his romantic getaway. Join superstar guest creative team Joe Kelly and Terry Dodson for this special two-parter where Spidey and Black Cat take their next step and no one tries to kill them yet. And now I want to show off the cover for The Amazing Spider-Man number 19 that I alluded to earlier. Here is a look at the John Romita Jr. cover for the issue right now. I really enjoy how we get a speech balloon over from Black Cat referencing that this indeed is Spider-Man's or her worst date ever. And I really enjoy the issue as well as we kind of get a really beautiful and dynamic line over from the Dodsons, particularly with Terry Dodson here. The way that he draws kind of such like a nimble Spider-Man kind of articulating in midair, just looking so kind of effortlessly cool is just a joy to behold over on the page. The Dark Web was actually the kind of last storyline in The Amazing Spider-Man, and it had a lot of particularly tense moments and held so many characters accountable that having this kind of shift, towards a fun and romantic Spider-Man issue, I think is a big kind of plus for the series. It also homages, really important aspects of Spider-Man going back to, the work that Stan Lee and like John Romita Sr. were doing on the title. So I think it's always important if you're going to do a longer Amazing Spider-Man run to try and shake up some of the romantic life behind the character. Also, as a quick aside here, I want to take a few moments and just mention how some of the audience has been reacting to this latest issue of The Amazing Spider-Man or the latest run on the series as a whole. I've been realizing that people are very negative on this title due to the fact that, Spider-Man is not currently with Mary Jane in a sort of romantic capacity. But I think this really gives Spider-Man the opportunity to venture out into its own direction and rekindling the romance between Black Cat and Peter Parker is such a great new direction for Spider-Man because it gives kind of an opportunity for, stories that have different contexts, different sort of stakes and relationships. Spider-Man is such an old character that doing these kind of changes are absolutely necessary. And it's hard to understand why this audience is just so against Peter Parker pursuing a relationship with someone else when at the end of the day, maybe Mary Jane is not servicing the story anymore since she's had so many decades of Marvel continuity. Also, just kind of the way that the Dodsons, depict these characters, and also the way that kind of, Peter reacts to his various supporting cast is really excellent. The kind of tone, the sort of downbeat approach to Peter Parker is adapted from Zeb Wells' previous issues of the series. So even though we're switching writers from Zeb Wells over to Joe Kelly, I still think there's so many kind of coherent aspects of this story. In particular, the way that Kelly and Wells write Peter Parker is just so similar in a certain type of way. One of the things about this story that didn't quite click with me as much as I wanted to is in the back half when they started introducing more of the plot behind Felicia and Peter's getaway. I think the villains that they try and shoehorn in the story feel particularly kind of forced and don't quite gel with some of the interesting, like, romantic material between Peter and Felicia. One thing I will say is that I'm a little bit intrigued by the fact that Marvel has tried to build up like so much continuity with the White Rabbit character over the past couple of Amazing Spider-Man runs. The way that they've been dedicated to kind of fleshing out and moving these characters forward to create a sort of like almost Flash approach to kind of the character and their villains, easing up a little bit and getting a little bit less tension is a really intriguing way to take the story. And I really hope that maybe another writer picks up that plot thread in a future Amazing Spider Man story. And also the way that Joe Kelly writes some of these jokes are just really kind of funny over on the page. That being said, I think one thing about this title is that it does take kind of that slapstick sense of humor a little bit too far in certain moments. However, I don't feel like that criticism detracts from some of the great characterization that Kelly worked on with, Felicia in particular. I think she has a couple personality traits in this issue that really kind of make her stick out from other characters. I also really like, kind of the mysterious guest character from Spider Man's supporting cast who returns unexpectedly for this issue. And she actually has some more interesting reactions to Peter Parker, too. So I think one of the most important things about this Spider Man run, carried from Dark Web to the Hammerhead story, even to this guest story, all the way from Spider Man Beyond as well, is just the fact that there's always been this sense of subtext behind the Amazing Spider Man. And I think if you look at Spider Man's love life, or Peter Parker's love life in particular, you can really start to pick up and let your kind of mind wander on what maybe Peter thinks about his current situation, what he thinks about his past situation, and it makes him seem just more like a real character. And plus, also, due to the fact that there was so much kind of heady violence in Dark Web, getting this like break for Peter Parker and fleshing out like a different part of the Amazing Spider-Man altogether is just really great to see. And also, I think the other thing about this story that's really cool is that if you go back and you look at previous issues of the Amazing Spider-Man, they've been trying to set up the relationship between Peter and Felicia for a really long time. So it's not like this is coming out of nowhere, and a lot of this material is being informed by other issues. So I really enjoyed the artwork for both of the Dodsons over on the Amazing Spider-Man 19. I think there's some great dialogue in this issue. The one thing I will say, kind of as I mentioned up top, is that there are moments where it can be a little bit too jokey, a little bit too slapsticky, but I still think this is a great issue of the series and a wonderful little diversion over from Dark Web. So I want to know from you, what were your thoughts over on The Amazing Spider-Man number 19? Did you like this issue as much as I did? What are some of your thoughts on Joe Kelly returning to the main Amazing Spider-Man series after such a long break? Are you invested in this kind of new chapter for Peter Parker's life? And do you think that, the Amazing Spider-Man's editorial team, do you think their decision of maybe taking a little bit of a pause on Peter and Mary's relationship is going to serve the Spider-Man mythology overall? Definitely curious to hear your thoughts on that. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for checking out the video, and I'll be back really soon for more excellent comic book content. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Bye.